welcome to the third episode of the Coaching Chronicles. I'm Alex, back once again here with Nathan. Nathan, how goes it? How is this week in drafting?
So this week, honestly, was a little rough. I know that we're going to have the record up there. I took a lot of the feedback from the previous sessions and tried to be a little more open, not commit to something right away, and it led to some really odd drafts.
Yeah.
As you can see, I think in this week I went 13 and 15 overall. I only had one winning draft, one break even, and 3 losing drafts. But honestly, I hate to say this, but sometimes you have to get worse to get better.
Totally.
And I do think that I felt stronger of what I was doing this week, but it maybe, made some new mistakes along the way, which is what, kind of what always happens, right?
Yeah, and not to, without getting into any specific draft logs or any specific gameplay scenarios or anything like that, I think for anybody out there and for yourself too, one of the things that I think is really important when you're trying to get better is not being afraid to lose and not being afraid to just make mistakes and try things, basically, right? Obviously, there's a limit. You don't want to be spending infinite gems or gold just trying to experiment. But I think, like you said, you kind of have to break the mold a bit from your old habits before you do make real progress. And I think that's really important. So that's something to keep in mind for you and for other people out there.
Yeah, a good analogy I have is back, I alluded to how I think coaching is important and I used it in other things. Golf is very, data driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to shoot pretty consistently in the 90s and I went and got lessons and we changed a few things. And I had a day when I went out with my buddies and I shot a 150. I just kept hitting the ball wrong and hosel and everything. I was like, I quit. What are these lessons? Fast forward, a few months later, and I'm shooting in the 80s and upper 70s, and I was like, all right, it was worth it. But it was a rough in the changing period.
Yeah, totally. And it can be discouraging at sometimes when you're like, well, I've listened to all these podcasts and I've read all these articles and it's still not working. But I think it's all about building the fundamentals, getting those ideas in there, and then figuring out basically where to integrate them. I think like you were saying, where you're trying to not pigeonhole yourself, like I was saying you were doing earlier when we first met. But you can kind of go too far in that and not lock into a color pair at the end of pack 3, right? And if you're an experienced drafter, you know how to navigate those waters, that's okay. But if you're still figuring out, finding your sea legs, as it were, right? It can be tricky to navigate the middle of the draft, not knowing where you're going to go to a successful lane, right? So I'd say for you, where you are, it's about not getting pigeonholed, but then locking in at some point so that it does become easier.
Sure. Yeah.
So what's on our agenda today, Nathan? What do we bring to the people today?
So I think I really want to focus on draft number 12 there. Mm-hmm. It's a draft that I don't think the deck ended up particularly strong. I think there's some weaknesses with it, but I also felt that in the gameplay, there were elements that I was really unsure. And there were a couple games in there that I felt like I probably should have won, mm-hmm. or a better player would have won, and then I didn't. And I don't know where the mistakes were. And I would like to try to, not only focus on the draft this week. I mean, I think the draft will be very quickly evident, where the mistakes were made and everything. Yeah. But the gameplay is where I really want to delve into this week.
Awesome. Yeah. And, I think that, especially this late in the format, we're 2 months into call time almost. I think this is going to be good because I think a lot of people kind of have at least a pretty good handle on the draft. Even, I'd say, for yourself even, you probably got a pretty good handle on the draft. And I think it's going to be good to look at some gameplay because that's something that is harder to convey through a lot of conventional content forms, right? It's hard to talk about gameplay through an article, hard to talk about gameplay through a podcast. So I think not just for you, if you're looking to look at gameplay, but I think for our audience out there, it's going to be good to look at some gameplay today. So I guess the way, we talked about this a little bit before, but I think the way we're going to do it is we're going to go a little bit quicker through the draft this week. For the past few weeks, it's been our focus. But I think this week we're going to do a bit of a quicker draft look, maybe take 10, 15 minutes, and then look at quite a few games, maybe 2 or 3 games, just to really get into the nitty gritty of the gameplay. Hey everybody, just before we jump into the draft, I just want to give a quick thank you to everybody who has donated to the GoFundMe page for the charity that Nathan and I are supporting with this project here. If you want more info on that project, for this charity that we're supporting, you can check out episode 1 of the Coaching Chronicles, or check out the GoFundMe page in the link down below. We're already more more than halfway to our goal that we're trying to reach before the new format comes out. So for a little bit of a push into the home stretch, we're adding some donation incentives. So part of my contribution for this project is I'm going to be donating some of my time for the people that have donated, and the top 2 donors on the GoFundMe page will receive an hour of coaching each, either for themselves or anybody they'd like to donate that time for. Again, check out the link down below if you're interested, and once again, thank you so much. All right, back to the draft. All right, here we are in the draft. Like I said, we'll speed through this draft a little bit faster than we had in previous episodes, but I think it's still good to talk about the navigation here. Give me some of your running thoughts about this pack. Like I said, we're pretty far into this format, so I think most people should be familiar with all of these cards by now. But yeah, this is kind of a stinker of a pack, unfortunately.
That was my impression. A stinker of a pack. In a previous session, you told me Frostdogger really needs 20 plus snow permanents, so I wasn't going there. I didn't want to try to do Plow. I've actually never done that, but I've watched people do it. So I just went with Shimmerdrift Veil. Seemed like the most flexible pick.
Yeah, I think there's Veil and Stalwart Valkyrie is another good option as like a white aggro card. You could even take Tormentor Selm as a red aggro card. I think that's totally fine. But totally buy the Shimmerdrift Veil. One of the things that's a little bit awkward about it is I think snow is a bit contested these days, but the great thing about Veil is you don't have to be in a snow deck to make use of it. You can just be splashing. All right, next up, what do we like?
I didn't want to commit to the gold card here, the Morite of Frost. I still can't say that card. So I was really trying to lean between Path of the World Treat and Bound in Gold. In a previous draft, I learned the lesson of Faceless Haven. You don't really want this snow, colorless card in your deck for the most part.
Yep.
So I ended up landing on the Path to the World Tree.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable. I think I would have taken Raptor or Bound in Gold. Probably Raptor just because it's a better aggressive card. Like, I guess after taking Shimmerdrift Veil, not at all tied to being like a snow deck or anything. I would just take the best card in the pack. And while I think Path to the World Tree is very, very good, I think it's harder to get into a deck that can activate it reliably these days because people are taking the dual lands very highly, taking the fixing pretty highly, So either of them are fine. I personally would have gone with the Raptor, but I think Path is totally a fine pick here. As long as you take into account, you might not be able to activate it and you might have to forsake it at some point.
So question for you on that. Do you think Path is not worth taking for fixing if you can't activate it?
Unless you have a really, your deck is busted, right? And you're like, oh man, I just need to cast my things. I would say no, because 2 mana to go get a land is a pretty bad rate for a mana fixer, generally, right? You want those effects to be like 1 mana. It's just a little too clunky to take up your 2-drop slot. All right.
So that was a disagree, right?
Yeah, no, it wasn't quite a disagree. It was just, it was a disagree. Yeah, I don't think it was a mistake by any means, but I would have just gone another way. And you know what? That's the thing. It's a disagree, not that I think it's like you were wrong at all. It was a disagree in that, that's my preference to draft a white aggro deck in this format where you don't have to have that preference, right? All right, what about this one?
So staying flexible and open, I didn't want to be married to my first couple picks, and I went with the Runed Crown.
Yep.
I think that card's really strong.
Yeah, I think these days you don't get like a focused Giants deck or a very focused blue-white Foretell deck. That's not really a thing in the first place, really, for the most part. But the decks are a bit less... My whole deck is doing this one thing because it's just harder to get those good synergies because people know what's up these days, right? And so what I've been doing is I think the runes are really premium because they give you this nice pocket of synergy. If you just got like a few runes, the crown is great. If you can get the rare, the champion, that's great too. But even just the pick, right, to put the runes on, gives your deck this complexity, this texture almost, where it's like, I'm not just a pile of creatures with some combat tricks and some removal spells. I'm doing this thing, this Rune Crown runes thing, that's kind of agnostic of any other synergies, but it does add power to my deck. So I love taking the Rune Crown here, and I would definitely look to prioritize the runes from here.
Great.
All right, next up here, what do we get? Not a great pack. Again, it's okay, but nothing too exciting.
Yeah, in the spirit of being flexible, I think I landed on Bound in Gold here, but I wasn't really sure on it between this Litjar Glade Warden, to be honest. But I've never really liked that Litjar Glade Warden, so I was also considering the Struggle.
Yep.
But with what I had, I landed on Bound.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, that would be my pick. I agree with that. Like, you could take Struggle for Skemfar because you've already got a green card in the pile. I agree. Glade Warden is not a great card. I think that there's, I'm noting that there's no land in this pack. That's kind of interesting, but I think that Bounding Gold is just the best card in this pack. So I would also take that. Yep. All right, moving on here. I think you can see you're kind of hovering over the rune. You're like, ooh, okay, I got the crown.
Yeah, this one was a tough one. I mean, pick 5 Behold was, I think, a sign. Also pick 5 Rune to go with the runed crown. I really wasn't sure, and I was trying to debate whether go for Rune for now or, weigh the future picks with blue coming with Behold. So I landed on Behold.
Yeah, so let's just go back to that quickly. I think I have a few thoughts about that, and this is one of the more contentious picks of the draft, I think, and one of the ones that actually drives the rest of your draft in an interesting way, where I think I'd be very excited about the Rune of Might with the Rune Crown in the pile. I want maybe, 2 runes if I can, but even 1 rune with the Rune Crown is great, and locking that one in here is very good. Rune of Might I've actually come upon quite a bit in the past little while, where I think it's comparable to the White Rune. I think those two are the two best ones. So I'm very excited about that card here. And Behold, conversely, I think is a bit overrated, basically. My take on Behold is that there's a lot of card advantage mechanics in this set, where a lot of the creatures just say draw a card on them in one way or another, right? They reanimate a card when they enter the battlefield, like the Shepherd, the Flyer, right? The Shepherd of the Cosmos, or like their Tuskeri Firewalker, and like they virtually draw you a card on the Boast ability. You tend not to run out of resources very often in this format. You don't end up top decking all that often, and so Behold's a good card, don't get me wrong, but I think it's taken a little bit early generally, and kind of like I was saying, where the runes give you that nice little like synergy, pocket of synergy in your deck, that gives me direction. Whereas Behold, a generically good card, but doesn't give me as much direction, and I think it is more replaceable, basically. So I'd give you a disagree on this one. Don't think it's bad, but I would really like to take the rune there.
What is your rune power ranking?
Yeah, good question. I'd say white, green at the top. I think you can make an argument for both. Red one's really good too, and then blue and black are, I'll take them or leave them. The black one has some combos with first strikers, but
the Hoggy Mob.
Yeah,
right?
Hoggy Mob, exactly. That's the other combo. But the blue and the black one, I think, are just the least impactful ones, and the Nile ones are really, really good.
Cool. Yeah.
All right.
I didn't have much experience with Rune of Might, so it's good to know.
Yeah, sweet. All right, next up here, take a Demon Bolt.
Yeah, I mean, A, there's nothing else in the pack.
Yeah,
B, pick 6 Demon Bolt seemed like a sign to me.
Pretty excited about that. So we're trending towards this place where we're not really sure what we're doing, but that's okay, right? I would say at this point in the draft, I'd be cautious because I think it's easy to go, oh, I have a Path, I have a Shimmerdrift Veil, I have some card draw, some removal, I can just be 5 colors, right? But the fixing might just not come to you, right? So if I'm noticing in the packs the fixing's not coming to me, I want to go, okay, let's see if I can narrow into 2 colors at some point here, and then maybe splash something, but try to have that core of 2 colors if I can. And it's like I said, I think it's easy to get distracted or detracted into, let's just play all my cards, basically. Yeah.
Maybe a little foreshadowing there, but also 6 picks in, 6 different colors, right? Basically.
Yeah, exactly. Here we're taking Mass Vandal. Yeah, I think that is the best card in the pack. Totally agree with that. And especially when I'm in this kind of seat like you are, where I am kind of all over the place. I've got a bunch of cards in a bunch of different colors, which, mind you, I want to clarify. I don't think it's a bad thing, right? It's just something you have to be aware of and make picks being aware of that you'll have to focus in at some point. But one of the things that I like when you have a bunch of colors is trying to bias towards green, not just because green can fix you in a few different ways, but also because green, I think, is the deepest color in the set. So it's good to just keep getting deeper into green because, it's one of the more successful lanes you can get yourself into. All right, and we take... this one's a tricky one. Want to talk about this one?
I think this is the first mistake of the draft. I ended up taking Squash over Dwarven Hammer. Dwarven Hammer, I think, is just a house. I probably should have gone there. All
right, so you knew what I was going to say before I even said it. So yeah, Hammer's great. I agree. I would have taken the Hammer here. That's a signal for me at this point. Pick 8. I think one of our previous episodes we talked about where signals really are salient and where they actually mean something. Pick a Dwarven Hammer, unless we're just at a table with 7 other people who don't know how good Dwarven Hammer is, and I think that's unlikely at this part in the format. I think that's a pretty good sign, especially because there's Squash in the pack. But yeah, I would take the Dwarven Hammer over the Squash. I think it's just a better card generally. All right, moving on here. This is our wheel pack. Sorry.
Let's see here. Honestly, I didn't think anything was super strong here, so I just went with the Yeti because it matched our colors. I guess I could have speculated on the plow. Now that looking at the draft a second time, there was an ox in there. I don't know.
I think I would have taken the Elderleaf Mentor here. Again, just kind of my reasoning where, it's Yeti and
Biased towards
Mentor.
green.
Yeah, Yeti and Mentor are about comparable cards. I think Mentor is probably a bit better, actually, and it's just green, so we can start to focus in a bit. We saw that Behold, but we don't have any other blue cards, so I would try to, at this point, try to focus in as much as I can. And even if you are some sort of 5-color deck at the end, you definitely want to have some sort of base, right? You're like base 2 colors, splashing the other things. And if I can lock into like green, which is a good color for fixing, and it's deep, and red, which seems to be open, I think that's a good lane to go down, basically. Moving on here.
I went with the Glacial Floodplain.
Yeah, I think it's totally fine. Yeah.
Snowland, kind of a splash color. What about that over the Glittering Frost based on the advice to bias towards green?
Yeah, so Glittering Frost is a really interesting one because that's a card that I don't actually like very much.
Okay.
I think it's a necessary evil. If you don't pick up fixing and you have like a monstrosity pile of cards that just aren't, they don't mesh very well together, or you just have a lot of colors, basically. I really want to rely on my lands to fix me because Glittering Frost, I see as a cost, where it takes up a spell slot in your deck, but it also is 3 mana to fix your mana. That's a lot, right? That's a big tempo hit. If your opponent is attacking you, the 2/2 and a 3/2, man, if you tap out for Glittering Frost, that's painful to just be able to have the privilege of casting your cards. So I'm trying not to put that card in my deck these days, basically. All right, move on to this one.
I went with the Snow-Covered Mountain.
Yeah,
I was trying
think
to choose it between it and Bind, and I was like, I'll go with the land.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. I mean, Bind is a fine removal spell, but take the land when you have some red cards. Here we take a Craven Hulk. Totally agree with that. Yeah, that's actually a pretty nice pickup for you. That's a late
very
Craven
late
Hulk.
there.
Yeah. This one I actually disagree with. I would probably just take the King Harold's Revenge because we might be trending towards just like a red-green aggressive deck, right? King Harold's Revenge is going to be pretty good there. So I'll give you probably a mistake on that one because I don't think you're going to be playing this God Hall Guardian. And you might, but you know what? I take it back. Probably disagree because there's a chance that you play this, and there's a chance you play King Harold's Revenge. I think they're kind of a wash, basically either way. I would personally probably be more likely to play a deck with King Harold's Revenge, but I don't think it's wrong to take the Guardian there, basically. We had a nice pickup. We pick up the land.
I had another shot to get one, but I got the...
Yeah, exactly. The land is much better there. Okay.
And then you end up with one at the end with an irrelevant pick there.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of that draft, where I'm thinking anyways, is I'm like, okay, red something. Right, maybe red-green because I've got a green card or two, and I picked up that green sack land, the Knotfold Slumber Mound. But I could be red something. It doesn't have to be red-green exactly. What about this pick? What do you like here?
This one I was kind of flummoxed on. Mistwalker I liked. Behold I liked. I'm in red, so Doomscar Titan looked good. I haven't really liked Carter's Vicious Return, and I haven't mentioned they're rare at all. I have zero experience with it, but it seems like you really need to have the cards in your hand, and you go up the ladder there. It didn't seem like a great one, so I landed on I think another Behold here.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable. And maybe we can toe the line between red blue and red green. That's a place I like to be, just kind of like red something, figure out the other color later. Right, or green something, figure out the other color later. Red and green specifically, by the way, because I think those are the deepest colors in the format. And so if I can get deep into one of those, I'm just gonna have a bunch of good cards, and I don't really care too much what the second color I pair with it is. So yeah, I totally buy Behold. Your instinct is certainly right. This card is not very good.
Okay.
So yeah,
I have no experience against it. It didn't look strong.
No, you're right. All right, moving on. We take a Icebind Pillar, which I think is reasonable. I think that you've got the Shimmerdrift Veil, you've got the 3 Snowlands. I think I want like 4 or 5 snow sources in my deck to make it comfortable, basically, so I'm not left with it stranded in my hand. And I think there is an argument for taking Tuscary Firewalker just to stay red, because red's open and you've got a lot of red cards in your pool. But I think Icebind Pillar is totally a fine pick here. All right, moving on. We get a pack with Shimmerdrift Veil and a bunch of other cards. Thoughts on this pack?
I landed on Shimmerdrift Veil, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine, especially because we might be splashing some number of cards here. So yeah, I like that. Cavalry is a fine card. I like it in red, blue, and red, green, which is where we are. Like we talked about last week during that red-white draft. Don't like it as much in the red-white aggro decks, but it is really good in your style of deck you have here, where you're hasting out bigger things. That being said, I think Shimmer Fail is totally a fine pick here. All right, move on to the next one. Ooh, interesting stuff. So what do you like here?
Loaded blue pack.
Yeah, loaded.
Yeah, I went with, I already had one giant. I saw the Mistwalker in pack 1. I already have a Shapeshifter with the Masked Vandal, so I kind of went with Glimpse.
Yeah, totally. Yep, I like that a lot. Totally agree. Glimpse is just a better behold when you have some number of giants in your deck. It's just the rate on this card is just ridiculous. So you just 3 mana, dig 6 deep, basically get 2 cards. So yeah,
that's great.
Can't disagree with that one. And yeah, okay, so we have a lot of options in this one pack.
Yeah, you've already given your spiel on this one. So I ended up on the Glittering Frost, but for everything you said, I think there's probably a different pick I should have made here.
Yeah, I would say this is a mistake. I think I'd be happy with the Pyre or the Frenzy Raptor or the 2-drop. That will be good if we pick up some number of what's called Boast Creatures. Mm-hmm. I think, the Frost, I think at this point, and this is something I think you can take forward into other drafts too, is you're pretty deep into red. There's nothing wrong with just getting deeper into red at this point, right? Because then no matter if blue's open or green's open in pack 3, we're gonna have a good deck. I feel like I've been that's what I've been saying all this draft, but I think it's just very true, and it's gonna lead you to a lot of successful drafts if you follow that. I would be on either the Raider or the Pyre. I think either of them is fine here, and I would classify Frost as a mistake. All right, moving on here. You take a Shimmer Drift Veil. Nothing exciting in this pack.
Again, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Totally buy that. Take a Craven Hulk, I believe. Yep, take Craven Hulk. I like that. I will say though, at this point in the draft, I'm a little worried about the curve. I think we've got a lot of 4s. We've got some card draw, and when you have card draw, you really want to have cheap cards, because what happens if you have too much card draw is you're like, all right, well, I'm not doing anything. I'm not putting anything on board, and I have this card draw spell in hand. I'm going to tap it on turn 4 to cast it. That's not very good, So I guess you don't have to tap out for Behold, but you know what I mean. You get the gist of what I was saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you want to pair card draw with cheap cards and especially cheap removal. So I'm a little bit worried about that as we go. This pick here, we take an island.
Yeah, can we talk about that one?
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I had the snow for the Icebind Pillar and everything else. Mm-hmm. But what are your thoughts on that over the Provoke?
Yeah, I think you just don't need Provoke. You've got Demon Bolt, you've got Squash, you've got Icebind Pillar. I think that Provoke is just like a third-rate removal spell, basically. It's fine in Giants, because sometimes you do get the Wombo combo of actually dealing them 9 or whatever on an unblocked Craven Hulk. But I think that your intuition here is really good. You just want to pick up the land to make the Icebind Pillar a reasonable card in your deck. So, big agree on this one. All right, moving on.
You're doing a no-brainer.
Little inventory.
Yeah, the Doomscar Titan wheels. So I snagged that one.
Yeah, the thing about Doomscar Titan, which is pretty interesting, is that it's I'm certainly going to take it here, but it's not really like a Giants card in my mind, right? Like it's a fine card, but it really is more of a red aggro card where you want to flood the board early and then get the big effect later. In your Giants decks, usually are a bit more defensive early and then have a big 4-drop. And this comes down to okay, it pumps your 2-drop and maybe your Mistwalker, but it's not as big of an effect as it would be in a red-white aggro deck with a bunch of small creatures and dwarven tokens. You know what I mean? So yeah, I agree with it here for sure, but I'm not once again going back to ooh, gotta look at that curve, right? Because I'm a little bit worried about where that's going right now. So take that. We take
Replicating Ring tabled.
Yeah, so I would classify this as a mistake too. I think you're.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I don't think this Replicating Ring kind of has the exact same problems as Glittering Frost. Now it's colorless. It's a bit easier to cast. You can cast a 1-mana spell off of it right away. Where Glittering Frost you can't often if you don't have the untapped land. But I think it's still got a lot of the same problems where it takes up a spell slot. It's just a bit clunky. And I think given your cards here, again, you don't really want to splash that badly right now. You're starting to get a really good focused blue-red deck. So I think if we can just take the Firewalker, especially because, like I was saying, we need some cheap cards, I'm going to be pretty happy to do that. And my number one concern, I guess, right now is just getting those cheap cards, because we really don't have anything that costs 2, besides these green cards, which we might not be playing. So Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about that, and I would be locking in the Firewalker.
All right, mistake on that one.
Yeah. All right, moving on here. Pick 10.
This is going to be another mistake.
Oh, yeah?
We take the Fatty Giant over the 2-drop.
Yeah, we definitely in the 2-drop there. You got to, as Luis and Marshall say, you got to eat your vegetables. You know, you got to just suck it up, take the 2-drop, even if it's not as splashy. So yeah, let's keep on going. We take a Master. Don't think that matters too much.
I think this one's irrelevant, right?
Yeah, I think so too. You know, it's a little bit interesting because there's a world where you play Port of Carfell in your deck because you've already got 3 Shimmer Drift Veils. So it's a tap blue source, and sometimes you have enough blue and red lands in your hand naturally. So you play this on turn 1, and then you can, on your Shimmer Drift Veils, just call it black to get this ability. Now, maybe that's a bit fancy play, and then you have a bunch of tap lands in your deck at that point. I don't think it matters in the grand scheme of things, but my point basically being that I do like playing these cards if they tap for a mana of my main color, which blue and red I think you're likely to be here, and I have ways to eventually activate them, basically. So like I will play Port of Carfell in a blue-red deck some percentage of the time. Basically.
So this was a disagree then?
I think so. Not even so much because sometimes you're going to pick up a good Saga and you're going to want to splash Master Scald because you've got the fixing. So it's a disagree, but I would even just give you an agree because it's a wash either way.
Let's just call it irrelevant then, so I don't get the stats padded.
Yeah, I think it's statistically irrelevant. Let's give it that. Yeah. All right, let's move on from there.
Next one's irrelevant.
Yeah, we got some irrelevant picks here. We pick up these sideboard cards, basically. Nothing matters here. And last pick.
Sideboard and best of one.
Yeah, exactly. All right, and we got some options in this next pack. What do you like here?
I was looking at the Icehide Troll, because we have a lot of snowlands. The Mistwalker, because we're already kind of in blue with the fixing. And the Runa Speed, because we had the Crown.
Yep.
I landed on the Mistwalker. I don't know if there's any other cards I should consider there. Or...
Yeah, I would say that right now I'm like off of green. If I'm in your seat, I'm just like, let's see if we can get a good red-blue deck here. I think if that's the consideration, Mistwalker is probably the best card for a red-blue deck. But there's another consideration of what I was saying before where we just need 2-drops, right?
Yeah.
So I agree with the Mistwalker here, but I really have to pick up those 2-drops the rest of this
Axe
pack.
Guard right there.
Yeah, exactly. I think the reason I would want to take the Mistwalker here is because we've seen red be a little bit open, and we've also seen Axe Guard Cavalry wheel in other packs. So I think it's reasonable that wheels out of this pack, especially when there's a Rune of Speed here, right? So I think, a little bit gambling here, a little bit, but I think that it's likely this Cavalry comes back and we'll be able to snap that up. So take the Mistwalker. Moving on here to...
So this was a choice between Bergstrider and Crush the Week for me. I really haven't liked Crush the Week in this format, so I went with Bergstrider.
Oh yeah, 100%. Bergstrider is fantastic, and I think Crush the Week is, they print these 2 damage effects a lot of the time, and I think they have they just never been, they haven't been that good recently, basically, where the creatures are just a bit too big, and especially in this format, they kind of just, you think this would be good against the red-white aggro deck, but then they go like, turn 1 Battlefield Raptor and to put an equipment on it, and it's like, well, now it just doesn't even kill that thing, right? So the deck that you would think could be good against, it's not even that good. So yeah, I totally agree with this Bergstrider. Not that excited about Crush the Week. All right, moving on here to...
I think learning my lessons here, or, while we're doing this draft now, I was trying to choose between Bergstrider and Giant's Amulet, but I think maybe in the past, you really haven't liked Immerstern Raider that much, but we need 2-drops. I'm trying to coach myself as we do this.
Yeah.
I ended up on Giant's Amulet, but my guess is that's not the right pick.
So I think that's a mistake because I think that I'm happier with Bergstrider than Giant's Amulet just in general. I think this is just a better card, especially because you have the snow to support it. There's an argument for taking Raider, but I think my same argument would apply to the Cavalry, that I think this will probably wheel out of this pack. This is a pretty strong pack in general, and yeah, maybe it's just the really responsible thing to just take the Raider. I could see that too. But I think Bergstrider is just a bit too good to pass up here. So I think this is a mistake on the fact that I don't like Giant's Amulet more than Bergstrider. And I'd actually be okay if you took either of these, basically. Either the 2-drop to be, eat your vegetables, be responsible, or Bergstrider on this is just the best card in the pack.
Okay, that's good to know between that and Giant's Amulet.
Yeah. So let's move on here. We get to do this pack.
I honestly don't know why I picked it, but I ended up picking the sinkhole. I was thinking in my brain, I'm like, oh, Bound in Gold, Master Scald.
Interesting.
White Snowland. I don't know. I have no good answer for this one.
We're still in the gotta play on my cards mindset here.
I think so. Yeah. How do I make all this stuff work?
Yeah, I think that's even we both identify that's probably a mistake here, and I think I would just be on the Raider as the 2-drop. Like you alluded to, I don't like the card very much, but look, you got to do what you got to do if you have no 2-drops. So yeah, I would take Raider here myself. Moving on to the next pack.
I didn't think that I was going to be playing too much green, so I like Finn. I think he's strong.
Yep, me too.
But I ended up on Mistwalker again.
Yep, I totally agree here. You just don't have very much green in your deck, basically. Like, I think that if I'm one of the important things to do, I think as you're drafting is kind of building as you're drafting, right? And going like, well, what's this deck going to look like? How does that inform my future picks or the current pick even, right? And I think if you did a check-in once in a while, right, you can go like, okay, I actually just don't have that many green cards, so maybe I should, not even consider the Finn, or maybe I shouldn't have taken, Glitter and Frost was still pretty early in the draft, but maybe not even to this draft this might not apply. But I think just there's a lot of value in kind of building a core of your deck, a shell of your deck almost, and saying this is what I'm going to be doing. And kind of filtering out all the noise of the picks that you've taken early. Basically, I think that just helps to streamline your draft, both for your your future picks, like I said, but just for yourself to just not have any Master Scald or Bound in Gold clouding your judgment. Exactly like that last pick we had there, where you took the sinkhole because of that, right? Where I think if you just laid things out, said, hey, I just have mostly blue and red cards, I think the picks in this pack get a lot easier.
Agreed.
So yeah. I would take the Mistwalker here.
All right, the next pick is easy.
Yeah, we got a nice Bergstrider here. Happy with third Bergstrider. I'm happy with 6 Bergstriders, so I'll take the third one. Let's move on here. We get not much, but what did you take here? I wonder if did you take the Bound in Gold? You did. Interesting, yeah. So I think Carfell Harbinger would be my pick here, right? I think just having a defensive 2-drop is probably what you want. Cast your Behold the Multiverse, cast your Glimpse of the Cosmos, and I just think also you already have removal in red. You don't have to be splashing for removal in white is the way I would look at it, right? You already have that role filled, so there's no the cost for you stretching your mana isn't worth it basically, because you already have cards that remove other your opponent's cards in your base colors is the way I would put it.
But I just want all the removal.
You just want all the removal, yeah, exactly.
So this is a mistake then.
Yeah, I would call that a mistake, yeah.
Yeah.
Move on here. We take a...
honestly, I didn't even pay attention to it at the time. You can tell on the right there, I yanked the green out of the deck. And so I gave up on the Rune of Might. What are your thoughts there?
I think I would have just taken it, and you can just play it with the crown, right?
Because you'll find it, right?
Yeah, you just go find it, exactly. Especially because you have the Shimmer Drift Veils, right? The Shimmer Drift Veils let you free roll the card, basically, where like if you have enough blue or green source or blue or red sources in your opening hand, you just call green on the rune or on the Shimmer Drift Veil, right? And then you can just cast the rune even if you don't have the crown. So yeah, I would be taking the rune here. I think this is I'd classify this as another mistake.
Yep, I got that.
Here
the next one's a mistake too. Then, like I don't. Honestly, I ended up on the Eyesight Troll. I don't know why.
Interesting, yeah.
My deck, I already pulled the green out. Why would I do that?
Really interesting. So yeah, I would have taken the Cavalry here. Here you take the. Let's raise the Draugr. I think that's fine. I mean, I think this is pretty much relevant. I don't think you're going to be playing Tormentor's Helm in this deck. You're just not that aggressive, so I think that's an irrelevant pick. Raider would be a nice pickup here. We would take a 4-drop. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of M's coming up in pack 3 here.
Yeah. And then this is pretty much irrelevant. And Mists of Ligur is not even that bad because this is kind of a pseudo 2-drop. So I think this is another mistake here, I would say.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And we ran out the pack. We did pick up a Scary Firewalker, which is pretty nice.
We got forced down my throat there.
After
passing on it a million times.
So just before we move on to the build, let's have a little bit of a debrief and look at your draft score here. You're doing the numbers between the two of us here. What's your agree disagree percentage for this draft?
I think this might be the highest disagree mistake
Ooh, wow.
percentage yet. I don't know about combined, but it's definitely the highest mistake percentage. 33% mistakes, which is a lot, honestly.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think
I think it all came in that pack 3 with all those 2-drops I passed on.
Yeah. I think that was the big the big hole, I guess, in this draft, the big blind spot that I would say you might have had during this draft. Because if I think about this draft and this deck and how it's going to pan out, like, you've got a lot of powerful cards, you've got good removal, you've got good flyers, you've got these Bergstriders, but it doesn't matter if they just go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, kill you, So I think this deck really could have used a lot, or this draft could have benefited a lot of just taking some medium 2-drops even along the way.
Yeah, and we'll see how that plays out, right?
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's take a look at the build. All right, so let's take a look at the build here. And it turns out, I was saying in the draft that we probably wanted to streamline to some just a red-blue deck. And maybe you're a bit short on playables here. But to me, at least, this looks ambitious. What are your thoughts on this build?
So obviously, looking at what happened in the draft there, the 2-drops are super light. I mean, the Beholds are technically 2-drops because you can foretell them, but we're just very light on that end of the curve. Like, the Giant's Amulet is kind of deceiving because you're never really going to cast it as a 1-drop. So
yeah, we don't have any board affecting 2-drops, I would say, aside from the Masked Vandal, right? Like, that's the key when we're really talking about 2-drops. And I think the thing that sticks out, the two things that stick out to me about this deck are, one, like I was saying, you just don't have 2-drops. But number two, you're kind of playing green for the privilege of being able to splash. Basically, like, the green cards are helping you splash, but they're also a splash, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that if you wanted to splash in this deck, just rely on the Shimmer Drift Veils in your lands, right? Where you could play the Bounding Golds if you wanted more removal. But I don't think you have to play Frost, which is already a card I was saying before I don't like very much, and Path to the World Tree, if you're trying to splash for other powerful cards. Now, Path I actually think is reasonable here. If you wanted to splash Path as like a gets you a land for any of your spells, and then is a good late game card because you can actually activate it in this deck fairly reasonably. I think that's actually a fine splash card in your red blue deck here. So like, I think you could splash the Path and the 2 Bounding Golds basically. Let's just look down here. I've transported to this part of the screen so we can look at the sideboard. But I think as for cards I might want to swap in, the Firewalker, perfectly good card in this deck. Frostpeak Eddy, not a fantastic card, but not a bad one in this deck where you have a lot of snowlands, and I think it's probably better than these, medium green cards in here, is what I would say. Just makes the mana a bit smoother. So I'd probably bring those in and take out like the Masked Vandal and the Icehide Troll myself. Okay, so let's just, talk about a score for this deck then. Marking you on curve, synergy, and mana base. Let's look at the curve first. No punches held here. I gotta give you a pretty low grade because I think not having 2-drops is almost like a cardinal sin in a way for limited. Where if you don't have those 2-drops, you're gonna have just a lot of other fundamental problems because your card draw is gonna be harder to cast. Your removal spells aren't gonna be as good because you don't have the early creatures to leverage them. You have to use your removal spells on their 2-drops when you could just have 2-drops in your deck that could trade off, right? Use your creatures as removal. So even though it's like a small thing and the rest of your curve is pretty good, I'm gonna have to give you a 5 out of 10 on this one because I think it's really gonna fundamentally affect the rest of your games. Basically, I think it's gonna affect how the games play out. As for synergy, I don't think this is like an overly synergistic deck, but I don't think it has to be. You've got the squashes, you've got you got the single squash anyway. You've got the 2 Behold the Multiverses with the cheap removal, which is actually a nice little bit of synergy. So, as far as cohesion in your draft, it's not the most cohesive game plan or anything, but you've got some things that are working with each other. Mistwalkers into Craven Hulk into Bergstrider is a nice curve. So I'm going to give you, I'd say a 7 on synergy for this deck. And as far as mana base goes, your mana base is actually quite good. Aside from these cards being in your deck, which I think I'll ding you for a little bit because that I think ties into your mana base as well. The fact that you picked up a lot of fixing in the draft means you're not going to have a lot of mana problems in general, right? So aside from, I think, this Snowfield Sinkhole, which I probably wouldn't play in this deck just because it is tapped white source. You don't have black. Actually, you know what? I take that back. Because if you're playing Path to the World Tree, it is worth it. So yeah, even this is fine here. I think this mana base is quite good. So I'm going to give you a solid 9 out of 10, just because a lot of tap lands can be a cost sometimes, basically. That's the only thing I would ding you for, where it's not super clean. The tap lands aren't as punishing if you have a lot of 2-drops, right? Because you can, those not having 2-drops makes you fall behind on board, and having tap lands makes you fall behind on board. If you had the 2-drops to supplement the tap lands, I don't think it'd be as bad. So I'll give you an 8 out of 10 for the mana base, basically.
Great.
All right, so let's dive into the gameplay here. Nathan, you were mentioning before that you wanted to focus on gameplay a little bit more this week. Give me some thoughts about, before we get into this, your gameplay in general. I think it's kind of interesting. Gameplay is often secondary, I think, a lot of the time to drafting, especially in Magic content, right? It's much harder to talk about gameplay. So just from your perspective, I'd love to hear your take on, how well you think your gameplay, how good you think your gameplay is, basically.
I think before we started this series, I thought that I was an average to maybe slightly above average player. Mm-hmm. I think that might be true more for Constructed, where you can get more reps and things become more predictable. Like, I know this, my opponent's playing X deck, and these are the cards that are typically in there. When it comes to Limited, you obviously the range of things that can happen are much larger, and I think I've learned through this series that my gameplay for Limited is probably average to, I don't want to say below average, but I'm probably right on average, right, to be honest. So, and I think, despite this deck missing some 2-drops and everything, I had a couple of games here and there that were very challenging. And I don't think we can just foreshadow this. This was a loss that I feel like I probably could have won at some point, but I don't know where it was. And I'm having trouble figuring that out on my own as I go through it. So I think, working as a team here, maybe we can identify some areas to improve in not only this game, but also identify some best practices to take forward. Yeah,
totally. And one of the tricky things about Limited gameplay, especially if you're coming from a Constructed world, is, like you said, the Constructed world is all about getting in those reps, pattern recognition, right? And Limited is about that to some degree. But I think fundamentally, the way I think about Limited gameplay is it is taking broad strokes, broad heuristics, if you will, and knowing when to break them, right? And that's the tricky part, because I can give you XYZ heuristic, and it's good to assimilate those heuristics into your gameplay, into your core as a player. But when it comes down to it, you gotta, I think the real tricky thing that people have a lot of trouble with a lot of the time is each gameplay situation really is a case-by-case individual thing you have to look at. And that's what's so great about Limited, right? Opposed to Constructed, like I said, which is more pattern-based, more you kind of get the reps in. So, I'd love to jump into these, giving you some broad strokes here. But it's also going to be really interesting just to dive into the nitty-gritty of each of these plays, I think. So, let's jump in here. We open up with a reasonable hand.
Yeah, well, I already mulliganed here. So this was a keep for me, but I wasn't sure what to put back. So just to delve in here, this is what you're talking about in the previous segment. I'm splashing the green to splash,
right?
Which comes back to bite me. I'm a blue-red deck,
yeah,
and I have 2 splash colors in hand, but I have a Shimmer Drift Veil, and I had to commit.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I put back? I didn't know, so I put back one of the Bound in Gold, because I figured I wasn't going to name white with the Veil. There's another bound in the deck, and I wanted to make sure that I could get my primary colors by naming green, getting the mountain, and with the mountain, and then Path to World Tree for the island. But I wasn't sure what to put back here.
Right. So basically, I think definitely the Bound in Gold, like you said. You'd have to call white or go get white with Path, and that's just really awkward. I think that I would probably put back. You got to keep the lands for sure, and I think Path to the World Tree counts as a third land, which you're probably going to want. So basically, I would narrow it down to Bergstrider, Demon Bolt, or Craven Hulk at that point, and probably just would bin the Craven Hulk. You're likely going to be a bit behind here, right? Because you don't have any 2-drops. Are you on the play here? Yeah, you're on the play, so that makes it a little bit better. But the Craven Hulk's not going to be blocking, and you're probably going to need to be blocking ASAP, basically. If you're not blocking, you want to cast a removal spell, which the Demon Bolt is. So I'd be looking to keep Path, 2 lands, Bolt, Bergstrider. And it looks like you kept... let's see.
I put the bound on the bottom.
Right. And this is... Oh, sorry. I thought this was a Mull to 5. Yeah, so totally agree. I would put the bound on the bottom. My mistake. I thought, I thought this was going to be...
You're looking for a second card.
Yeah, I was looking for a second card. I thought this was a Mull to 5. So totally agree with your assessment here. All right, so let's move on. A little bit. We'll fast forward. You Path. You go get an island. Yeah, that's totally reasonable. That Replicating Ring was a decent draw. And we have
a lifesaver.
We have total lifesaver. Interesting decision here, though. We could play either the Replicating Ring or the Mistwalker. Curious on, we'll see what past life Nathan did, but on today's Nathan's brain, what do you like doing here? You have a few options.
Yeah, that's a good question. So this game was a couple of days ago, so I don't remember what I did. What would I do now? I would probably do the ring to make sure that I hit a mana so I could Hulk next turn. Mm-hmm. If I don't draw anything, or if I do draw a land, I might be able to Berg. Mm-hmm. What would current Alex do?
Yeah, good question. So basically, my opponent has played 2 lands, foretold something. That tells me that this is going to be, it's not the fastest game. My opponent hasn't gone Mountain Ferocious Pup or Fearless Pup into, a 2-drop, right? So that basically means I'm okay skewing a little bit away from immediately affecting the board, right? I think you do probably want to set up your mana situation so you can cast multiple spells on later turns, or just cast the most impactful spell going forward each turn. So with that being said, I don't feel the, absolute urge to get on board with this Mistwalker. I would probably cast the Replicating Ring here myself, just so we can, kind of like you said, ensure we can deploy all of our cards and the marginal value of getting the Replicating Ring going as soon as possible, right? Because eventually you want to activate that path. So yeah, I definitely think I would play the ring. That's what you did too. All right, cool. So we can move on here. Opponent plays a Boreal Outrider. All right. And here's another really interesting choice here. Same thing. I'll ask, what does today Nathan do here?
I find that card particularly scary, especially since they already have 1 Snowland down. Dropping a Craven Hulk doesn't really help because it can't block. I mean, I guess I can pressure them. I think I would Demon Bolt it.
Let's see. I think past life Nathan also did that. Okay, so this is really interesting because now we're at the point where this isn't a game that is going to go, like I said, it's not going to end soon. It's probably going to go to end turn 8, 9, 10, basically. And, you've got a few other removal spells in your deck, certainly. But I think the fact that you don't have that many means this Demon Bolt's going to be pretty precious to you, right? Because I'm sure this isn't going to be the best card in their hand or in their deck, right? And additionally, I think that the Boreal Outrider isn't actually that threatening because they've called red on their Shimmer Drift Veil. And so they could totally have more red sources in their deck, more snow sources in their deck. But this basically just means that only red spells get the counter, right? Only red creatures, which is one of the awkward things about Boreal Outrider, right? So I wouldn't count this as so much of a threat, especially because you have big creatures that can probably trade with their big creatures, right? Like, in this spot, I would just be looking to go, you know what? This Demon Bolt's probably going to be important at some point. Maybe it blows out like, some combat. They cast an equipment or a combat trick or something like that, or just kill an important creature. And while yes, I agree that the Boreal Outrider could be threatening, I think the risk, it's an acceptable risk to take to say, you know what? I'm just going to try to deal with this Outrider by blocking, by attacking, right? And again, if they had a bunch of Snowlands, maybe it's a bit different because it's like all their creatures come in bigger, but it's only going to be a subset of their creatures right now. So I would probably just play either the Craven Hulk because it's okay to take 3 on the chin here, or the Mistwalker, probably leaning on the Craven Hulk because, if you can develop a big board, then the Demon Bolt becomes even more important because then you can go, all right, go Craven Hulk, Bergstrider your thing, next turn get in for 4, Demon Bolt your other thing, attack you for 8. Something like that. So yeah, I just think that it's a little bit you're jumping the gun a bit on the Demon Bolt here is what I would say.
Any consideration for double foretell, or do you want to get something on the board?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you certainly could double foretell, but I lean towards just casting things rather than foretelling things. You know, there's certain situations where it's like, especially with Struggle for Skemfar, because you get the discount on that one when you foretell it. Or there's situations where it's like, oh, I can foretell this turn and I'll have a really good turn next turn because I, can use all my mana. But generally, you just want to err towards on the side of put the things on the board, basically. The fundamental goal or purpose of foretell is to most efficiently use your mana, right? And it lets you spend mana on a turn that you might not you don't have the full mana to cast the Doomscar Titan, so you foretell it and you can cast it later, right? And you kind of give up a little bit of the value there if you're not just playing to the board in the first place, right? If you're just like going foretell, well, that's just like you're just kind of wheel spinning to some extent, right? So yeah, sure. I would just err towards playing the Craven Hulk. All right, so we move on from there, and opponent casts Sevilla. So immediately, we're like
instantly punished.
Instantly punished, because that's definitely a card we have to deal with. And interestingly, I believe we're back to our turn now. We drew our Behold the Multiverse. They've missed a land drop, right? And that's key for me because this is my I smell blood moment, basically, where I go, oh, okay, they've missed their land drop. There might be limping along a little bit. Who knows? Maybe I'm lucky and they miss their next 2 land drops even, and they have to activate Svella. So I'm going into beatdown mode as soon as possible here, and already we're seeing where playing the Craven Hulk might have been a little bit better, because then we can really punish this start, and that's one of the great things about getting on board early. You can punish starts like what the opponent has, right? Where they just go.
Just to play devil's advocate,
of course,
though,
yeah.
If we hadn't have demon bolted the Outrider, this fellow would be a 3/5.
That is a great point. Yeah, exactly. Okay, you do have a good point there because it is a red creature. So
it's
red,
yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you that.
So I behold it because I didn't want to miss a land drop, and
yeah.
I don't know if that was the right play either. I mean, should I have Craven and then Craven can attack and threaten a block for Svella?
I think so. I think you just have to pressure here basically when the Svella's on the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the takeaway here is I'm spending too much time spinning wheels, losing board presence early in the game.
I think so, yeah. And this is just, I think, these kind of early game, these when you're spending the turns doing nothing, this is when you start to lose to the Bomby cards, even just a Lindworm, right? Because it's just so much harder to stabilize when you don't have a board presence at all in the early turns. So you play Bergstrider. Yep, I agree with that. Totally. Lock it down.
Yeah. My game plan was to Bergstrider into Bergstrider and just keep Svella locked down if I could.
Yeah, so they activate Svella. Yep, I agree with that. Okay, we move on to their turn. They play a Battle for Bergard and a Usher of the Fallen. Okay, so we have a lot of options. We draw an Ice High Troll for the turn. What do you like doing here?
Ooh, I think jam with the Bergstrider. And then Bergstrider again on Svella, I think. I don't know. What would you do?
So let's just see. So I just want to check out your play quickly. You do indeed do that. I think this is a turn where I would probably have just played the Mistwalker. Actually, I think there's a few reasonable lines here. You could play the Mistwalker and the Ice High Troll because those are 2 threats, and especially the Mistwalker can fly over whatever they play most likely, right? And the Ice High Troll is not going to be able to be blocked very easily. You've got 4 snow sources here, so those are both major threats. And they use up more of your mana, and they threaten more damage actually. So I think by playing the Bergstrider here, you make sure the Bergstrider potentially can get in, or these 2 Bergstriders potentially gets in past the Svella because that's not going to be able to block. But I don't think they would block the Svella anyways, and so I would just hold the Bergstrider for next turn so that you could lock down a bigger creature, basically. Like imagine this board state, right? Where you have Bergstrider, Mistwalker, Ice High Troll. They have an untapped Svella, which they might make mana off of, but that's okay. If they make mana off of, that means they're not really affecting the board very much. And if you have the 3 creatures on the board and the Bergstrider, you can tap down a Lindworm or something that they play get in, or if they don't play anything impactful, you can activate and maybe foretell or something like that. So the long story short here for me is that I think that the Bergstrider doesn't pressure enough, and I think, especially because we've burned the Demon Bolt early, one of our key interaction pieces, I think we're going to need this Bergstrider on a later turn to interact with one of their important blockers. Because if I'm putting myself in the opponent's shoes right now, I'm trying to stabilize here, right? And that stabilization plan most likely includes just playing a bunch of creatures out. That's most likely going to be their plan. And if you have this hidden information of this Bergstrider coming down in a turn or two, that's going to be pretty backbreaking for them if they weren't planning for that. You know, I'm sure you've experienced a situation where you're like, okay, well, here these blockers are going to be good enough. I've done the math, but if they have a removal spell or you know, heaven forbid, a Bergstrider, it's going to be really bad for me. And I think that's the situation I would try to put my opponent in here.
Now, I'm always reticent with so many snow sources to play an Ice-Eyed Troll without leaving up the 2 snow for like defense. You would just jam it here. Okay, it's good to know.
Yeah, I think so, because I guess think about it this way, right? Ice-Eyed Troll is just one game piece. It's just one creature, right? If that dies, that means they've used a removal spell and they haven't used it on the Craven Hawk or the Doomscar Titan or the Mistwalker, right? You've got a lot of replaceable or interchangeable threats here. I don't think the Ice-Eyed Troll is all that important, basically, you know?
I'm just basically overvaluing it.
Yeah, overvaluing it a little bit, but also think about it this way. If you leave up the 2 mana, that's 2 mana you're going to be wasting a lot of the time, right? It's you've almost Stone Rained yourself twice if you're just passing the turn every turn with 2 lands. So, yeah, I guess the overarching concept with this turn for me would be get your creatures on board first, and then your interaction spells to interact with their creatures. Because the more creatures you have on board, the more impactful your interaction spell will be. You know, just getting a bigger hit, basically.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, and they cast Amaya here, so that's a big problem for you, right? That's like, oof.
Yeah, if only I had a demon.
Well, there. See, now I can say, oh, see, and that one wouldn't have gotten pumped by the Veil, or sorry, by the Outrider. So, yeah, that is something that's like, ugh, that is a huge problem. So, what do you do here? Because I think this is a very common game state that people get themselves in, where it's like, man, the board's stalled, I have these creatures, my opponent's got all these cards in hand, like, what's my game plan from this point?
I don't remember what I did, but I hope that I did what you suggested last turn, which is drop the two creatures.
Yeah, let's just take a look at what you did, and I do want to talk about this turn. So yeah, I agree with dropping the 2 creatures, totally, because then you can Doomscar Titan at some point, maybe get in a big attack, especially if they're like, you know, they get a bit antsy with their attack, which you're hoping they do at some point, potentially. But I just want to talk big picture here for a second. What's your plan from this point on? How are you getting through this giant army? How are you not dying? How are you planning to, take the reins, basically? Do you have a plan?
Right now, my only plan right now is basically Mistwalkers.
Right.
I mean, that's the only evasion I have. We're basically drawing towards a squash at this point to kill Maya.
Yeah.
Or hopefully getting 1 point on it and finishing it off. Finishing it off with the Path to the World Tree, but honestly, at this point, we're drawing pretty thin.
We are drawing pretty thin, and in that case, it's kind of interesting because we'll get to a combat here, where it's very interesting to talk about what you're trying to get your creatures to accomplish, given the game state and given what's left in your deck. Because if you had a lot of removal spells left in your deck, I would be on board with going, I don't want to really attack here because I can leverage those removal spells, kill the Maya, get in a big hit. You know, maybe go Bergstrider attack, blow out Maya in combat. They go double block on the Bergstriders. We get to eat some creatures. That's great. But I think with only a few removal spells in the deck that kill Maya, I think your best plan here, and I think you went to, you said no attacks here, basically, right?
My just to talk through that thought process, I said no attacks, no spells.
Right.
I counted the math. For Svella, they could get 1 activation in here.
Yeah.
But if I blew up one of their lands, they might not be able to do it again next turn unless they draw a land.
Oh, okay.
So I was trying to keep them from going into my turn Svella and then on their turn Svella.
Yeah, I feel like that's it's a lost cause at that point. You know, like I think trying to keep them off the mana, because they can just do that next turn. If they were really missing a land drop, they could just activate Svella, make another Manalith, and then do it the turn after, right?
Yeah, I just was looking at my spells. My options are pay 4 mana and put a 4/4 on that can't block.
Mm-hmm.
Pay 6 mana and get a 5/4 that has haste, and then it comes back to a 5/4.
Yeah.
Or just use all my mana and put a 4/4 on that can block and destroy one of their lands.
Right. Yeah, so Yeah, I think it's totally reasonable to do that, by the way. I think it's totally reasonable to activate that there for that reason, because maybe it makes them use this fella, right? But let's talk just quickly about what you're planning to attack with over the course of the next few turns. Are you planning to attack, basically, with anything but the Mistwalker?
I jam with the troll, make it immune, basically.
I think that's a reasonable
indestructible.
Play. I think that's a reasonable play. Yeah, I think I'd be in for attacking with the Bergstriders too, though. I think because I think that they're starting to just accrue infinite value basically here. Where right, I think you want to pressure them into trading off, because if you can go make them double block, whittle down their board, then you've got an army of 4/4s here, right? It's not a great exchange, right? It's not a great exchange to go trade my 4/4 for your 2/2s, right? They're making 2/2s off their lands. They're getting infinite value off of this fella. But I think that it goes so much more poorly for you if you just let them keep their board state, right? I think that we have to simplify the board a little bit so that they don't just have free reign to do whatever they'd like, right? Again, this goes back to if you had more removal spells to draw into and leverage your creatures that way by killing the Maya and then getting in, I like holding back. But I think, given that you don't have many, I think you're just hoping that they don't cast anything super great off Spella for a few turns, and you're able to whittle down their board and then attack with a few 4/4s in a few turns and getting clean hits, basically.
So would you have Doomscarred there and then jammed?
I think whatever makes the best use of my mana is what I would have done, right? So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so I would have played the Doomscar, and or you could, because this is 6, you could go like Craven Hulk, pump the Mistwalker. Actually, no, I think what I would have done is attack with these two, right? And then you have activation of Troll up or Mistwalker pump up, and then just play a 4/4.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
All right, so.
Yeah, you could do Craven Hulk to suspend Doomscar.
Yeah, or this is a fine line too. Like the line you took is also fine. This does actually use the actual most of your mana, right? So
I said suspend, but we meant foretell.
Suspend, foretell, same mechanic. All right, so you can move on here. Opponent keeps making things. They got a big old 4/7. Okay, now the board is stalled. Yeah, this is really tricky. Our ring's about to pop off, which is nice. The Mistwalker gets in there. And at this point, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight this real quick. I think this is a example of what I realized in game of not doing the math on how much I can pump the Mistwalker. So I didn't really think through my plays clearly enough to say, all right, let's say hypothetically I'm going to do these Ken Seekers. You know, what can I pump with the Mistwalker and what can't I? So
right.
I think I just wanted to flag that as a mistake that I learned myself in this game.
Well, kind of interesting because next turn the ring's gonna pop off, so you have no mana problems at all. So I think it might actually just be better this turn to do what you did and just play out a creature, right? Because the math, if you're thinking about the clock, right, of how many turns it's gonna take to kill them. They were at 16 there. Yeah, no, I do agree with that then, because you could pump.
Well, I didn't know if I need to max it out, but I mean, I could just at least make it a 2/3.
There's no reason
then
not
drop
to.
Another creature.
Yeah, no reason not to. Exactly. Yeah. I buy it 100%. All right, so Kinseekers.
I dropped the Kinseeker and then I foretell. I was like, all right, that made use of the mana at least, but I probably should have pumped and shortened the clock.
Did they miss on their spell activation? No, they made a manolith because you just destroyed the land.
Yeah, because I blew up the land.
That makes sense. All right. And they just keep building up their board state. You've got the Titan here. And you think, what am I doing? So, real quick,
you would have probably should have. At this point, there's no point in jamming with the troll, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess there could have, because the troll has like infinite pumps now.
Yeah, I think you could though, because they have to block it, right? They absolutely have to block it. So I think you should probably, again, going into the same concept we talked about back here, when the board is a little simpler. I think it's good to simplify the board at this point. Here, the same concept applies. Now it's much slower because the troll's only going to eat one thing a turn. But if you don't pressure them into blocking with one thing a turn, they're just going to eventually build up the board where they can just go, okay, attack all, I got you, I kill you, right? Where if you attack the troll each turn, they have to block, and that game state where they go attack all, kill you, doesn't come as quickly. You have more turns to pump the Mistwalker, to draw into gas, to activate the path, right? I want to do my best to force them to trade off creatures or force them to block here, basically, so that they're not building up this gigantic board. All right, so we move on here. Continue with our plan of Mistwalker activating.
Yeah, and I think there's an example right there again. Not Mistwalker activating enough.
Yeah.
I think I left. So at this point, I've left 1, and I think another 1 point damage here on the table as well.
And this is great too, because for a takeaway for coaching here or just self-improvement is that I didn't have to tell you that. You told yourself that, and you just watched the video, right? It's just by simple merit of you looking at your gameplay and going, oh, that was stupid. Why didn't I do that, right? And that's a lesson you can take for yourself for next time, right? So it's something as simple
ahead of time.
Yeah, something as simple as just like looking back at your gameplay really does help. All right, so we go on.
Another Svella.
Yeah, geez. And luckily they're not hitting anything super huge. Actually, this Batter Shield Warrior they're hit. That's kind of the thing, right? Because
that's the scariest thing. I think,
right, exactly. And just to not to belabor the point here, but if we had been whittling down their board, making them trade off stuff, the Batter Shield Warrior wouldn't have been as scary, right? Because they wouldn't have this gigantic board. They'd have to have blocked at some point. They'd have to have traded off, right? Just the way Magic cards are designed, generally they work better if you have creatures on board. The Batter Shield Warrior, especially cards in like a white deck or a green deck, right? Like, for a very simple example is if I make my opponent trade off, their combat trick they draw will not be very good, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of cards in their deck, I'm assuming, that will be better if they have a large board, and we can kind of mitigate those in a way by trading off in that situation.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that in the game. Like, they're designed to go wide. They're going to make benefit of this. Maybe they have what is the horn?
Yeah, the +2, the plus, yeah. Or just the Batter Shield Warrior, right? It's just like, there's quite a few cards like that. Thoughts on the Path of the World Tree here?
I know I end up using it at some point to pick off something, but I don't remember what it was. I think I take out the Usher because I'm like, well, that's the only thing that I can kill.
Right.
Because it only does 2.
Yeah, and you know what? I would be activating the Path as soon as possible because I just want to find that
I think I do
squash.
it here.
Yeah, I think I would try to find the squash, and you do activate it. Okay, you do find the squash, which is great. That's like, things are lining up here. And if we move on a little bit, we go, okay, so we're planning here. And thoughts on what's today, Nathan, think about this play. You've got squash in hand, you're pressuring them with the Mistwalker. Your goal here is kill them with the Mistwalker in the air. But what else?
Honestly, this is one of those board states that I have a lot of analysis paralysis on.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know the right line.
Totally.
Given what we just talked about, probably we should be jamming with the Mistwalker and the Ice Hide Troll to try to whittle them down from that perspective. I think I end up squashing the Maya. Mm-hmm. And then I don't remember what I do with the Giant's Amulet. So
I think my play here would be, we're at 22. We're not quite in danger of dying, especially if Maya is going to die. And we're pretty sure Maya is going to die here, right? So my play would be, let's attack with quite a few things. Because they're probably going to line up some blocks where they're going to double block some things. And we can maybe even get them in combat here, where we go, they double block Bird Strider with two 2/2s. We go, kill Maya in response. That trade does not work for you. I keep my Bird Strider, right? So kind of leverage the unknown information, basically. And I think a lot of times, I'm not saying you did this here, but I think sometimes we forget that opponent doesn't know what's in our hand, but doesn't know what our plan is, right? So I would be looking to basically, like I said, maximize on the hidden information here. And attack with all and see how much value I can get out of, basically making them make a poor decision by making awkward double blocks. Now, the Spirit of the Elder and the God's Hell Guardian do throw a wrench in that plan a little bit, right? Because they, those are larger creatures. But if we kill the Maya, the God's Hell Guardian won't be able to kill a 4 toughness creature, and we'll trade with the Spirit. So I think it's an okay thing. So I think what I would have done is attacked with maybe 3 or 4 things here, basically, and let's see what your play was.
I mean, you could have Doomscarred and then
that too.
squashed.
Yeah, could have even done that. Look, we have all the mana in the world, right? We could even have given our Craven Hulk haste if we wanted to, right? All right, and we play. Yeah, we just stack with the Mistwalker.
And there's another example right there, just pointing it out again. Look how much mana I leave undone at the end of turn that I could have been pumping the Mistwalker. At this point, we're at least at like 5 extra damage. They should be at like 5.
Yeah, it's really close. And, this is a very obvious, we can point that and be like, that's missed damage. That's damage on the table. But I think in a lot of games, especially where a lot of people are like, oh, where did I lose this game? A lot of times, it's not like cards you didn't cast or sequencing. A lot of times, it's not stuff like that. It's really the damage race. It's really, how am I sneaking in those points? How am I preventing a few points on the opponent's side, right? I think that's where the majority of games are lost and won, because that's hidden a lot of the time. It's very tricky if you're not, if you don't have a ton of experience in navigating tricky combats like this, to note when you can get in and when you can't, right? Obviously, like I said, this is an easier situation to point out, but there's a lot of times where, there's forced attacks or forced blocks or very easy attacks, free attacks, right? Where it's just like, there's no way they block here. We can get in 2 points, right? We could even get into bluffing where it's like, they know there's no way they block their Svella on turn 3 here. We get in 3 points here, something like that. That's the next level up, of course. But I think just at a baseline, if you're looking, for the viewer out there, if you're looking through your own games for where did I lose to win this game, a lot of times it's not the spells you're casting, it's the damage you're trading or not trading a lot of the time.
Going back to we have 7 untapped mana lists there. We could have done all of this, dropped the Doomscar, and still had the squash up.
Yep, totally.
So now, like, honestly, this is the first time we're talking through it as a coaching thing. Like, I knew that I had lost points or approaches somewhere in here. I feel like this was a winnable game.
Yeah, I think I don't know exactly how we'll see how this ends, but I think that is true. And look, here we have that big turn where we were talking about, where it's like their board is just gigantic now, and we just don't have very good blocks. They get a little bit gun shy there a little bit though, so they're like, okay, and they actually give us another turn, which is great, right?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, that they alpha the next turn, and I don't end up squashing the Maya. I squash the Batter Shield Warrior before they can pump.
Oh, interesting.
I don't even know why I did that. Does that any better?
I think killing the Maya makes sense because it's basically the same thing as killing the Batter Shield, but this gives them extra creatures when they play lands, right? So you might as well just kill the token producer.
Yeah, I think that's what I end up doing. But right now they should be at 5 based off the previous math that we had done, right?
And if we play Doomscar Titan, that's dead, right? That's an extra point of damage.
Yep.
And if I were to guess, this Doomscar Titan is staying at least.
I think it's a post combat.
The Doomscar Titan of shame.
Yep.
I was gonna say, if I were to guess, and you tell me, this Doomscar Titan stayed in layaway for a long time because I think potentially you were thinking, well, what does this Doomscar Titan tell me to do? It tells me it wants to go in for a bit, a team attack basically, and maybe there will be like a turn down the line where I can get in a big team attack, right? Was that a thought potentially?
Yeah, and I just it didn't even cross my mind. I'm like, oh, this 1 point of damage that it gives the Mistwalker could make a difference in this, when in reality it could have. So I think there was just not good thinking around what to do with it.
And I think,
and even right now, it'd be better served. I know they're going to try to alpha. It would be better served as a blocker right now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think so too. And this goes back to kind of the first thing I said during the Skill of Gameplay segment, where it's like, I can give you all these heuristics, and the cards can even give you heuristics of what they are telling you to do, right? Doomscar Titan tells you, oh, you should probably, cast, go in for an alpha attack when you can with this card, save it until that turn. But on this case-to-case basis where we look at this specific game state and say, how does this Doomscar Titan best serve me here? Well, it's probably going to be best as a blocker and get a point in with the Mistwalker, right? And that's the real tricky point, is asking, for every game scenario, ideally, if we were supercomputers, for every game scenario, how does this card best serve me? And it's not always just written on the cards, basically, right? All right.
Let's see if we do the post-combat Doomscar Titan of Shame.
Yeah, I think
it's like when you get Dazed or Manatide,
and you play a land. The post-Dazed land classic. And we're just waiting. Bated breath here.
And I don't think we need to analyze these blocks.
No, it's a lot.
The mistakes were made. The mistakes were made further.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, and so big attack happened, and look, good guy Nathan Even says he had fun when he lost. So yeah, that's a lot to take in. I mean, that was a fairly lengthy and complex game, but I mean, and we can even go into deeper analysis of each single turn. But there's so much stuff in just that one game that either was interesting to talk about, was things that you agreed, hey, yeah, I should have done that, and there's probably a few things that we could have even talked about more that we didn't even touch on here. But I don't know, tell me, I'd like to hear your perspective. What do you think about the concepts we talked about? Like, are they native concepts to you? Are they things you're like, oh yeah, I know that, and you're just not implementing as readily? Or are there things that are like, oh, I just don't think about that? Because I think that's interesting as a self-improvement thing, asking yourself, and again, for the viewer at home, it's good to ask yourself, do I know this thing and I'm just not doing it, or do I not know the thing?
I think for me that I did not think about the concept of board reduction.
Right, yeah.
I think one of my weaknesses as a player is I'm very reticent to have my pieces, my cards, forfeited.
Totally, yeah.
So the idea of trading off a 4/4 for 2 tokens didn't sound great to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was thinking enough down the line of like what the ramifications of that could be. So I think that's a new concept for me, something I need to work on.
Yeah, and I mean, just to touch on that just quickly, the heuristic that it could give you, again, it's not always going to work, but if you have a lot of removal or tricks, don't trade off boards. If you don't have a lot of removal or tricks, you want to trade off the board, basically, because you don't want them to be able to leverage their board, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw no tricks from them.
Yeah, exactly. So let's do a quick gameplay score here. I think overall, I think that a lot of your early turns, that there's that Demon Bolt turn that we talked about, which in the grand scheme of things, I don't know how much that would have changed things, right? If we could have killed the Maya, if we could have killed something important, right?
We would have been able to kill the Maya. We wouldn't have been able to Doom Bolt the Svella because it would have been a 3/5, but Maya would have come in as a 3/4 and we could have killed it.
Yeah. I think with, as much damage was left on the table, I think the core thing here is, like you said, if this is probably a winnable game. So I think I probably have to dock you some points for that. So I think I'll give you a C for this game, basically, right? Not terribly played, but at the same time, I think there was quite a few things that we could have done to turn this game around, and at least battle a big, put up a good fight,
Yeah. I think this was a very average played game from my perspective, whereas you or a better player would have won this one.
Yeah, but I don't know. Potentially. Who knows how it would have gone in another world, right? You can never tell. All right, so let's wrap things up from there. Nathan, anything you want to talk about as a takeaway for today?
No, I mean, I think for me, the takeaway was this was a rough week in terms of record, as we talked about in the first segment, but it came from me trying new things,
right,
and trying to adhere to the previous lessons learned and try to improve moving forward. So, hopefully next episode we'll see, some steps forward. As I mentioned before, you don't always get better before, sometimes you get worse before you get better. And this was a step back, but we learned a lot of new things this time. So hopefully better things are to come. Right?
Well, I think that's a great lesson in its own. And I think a lot of players get bogged down in that sometimes. Sort of like, oh man, like I've listened to all these podcasts, I've read all these articles, but I'm still losing. Like I'm kind of a little bit lost, right? It's very much, you gotta trust the process, right? And especially when you can come away from a coaching session, an article, a podcast, and say, hey, that's something I didn't know, or that's something I hadn't considered. It's gonna come up in some game at some point, and a different you in a different universe that didn't engage in that content would do even worse, right? So even though the wins aren't coming maybe right away, you're gonna it's hard to see, but you're almost certainly doing better than an alternate universe you would have been dealing with, So yeah. All right, why don't we wrap it up from there? Nathan, I think each week I feel like just the conversations we're having are getting more complex. I can see, it's just great. This is the greatest part about being a teacher, being a coach of this nature, where it's just like seeing the progress, right? I just love that part of it, and I'm looking forward to next week.
Yeah, hopefully the mistake score will go down.
Yeah, hopefully. All right, let's just sign off from there. If you'd like to contact me, all my information, all my links are in the description down below. If you'd like to email me for coaching, if you'd like to just follow me on Twitter, if you'd like to join the Limited Level Ups Discord, which is the podcast Discord, check that out. All the stuff in the description. Nathan, what about you?
You can find me at nathan@levelinguplives.com or the same handle on Twitter.
Sweet. Yeah, and I'll put your stuff in the description as well. I'm sure people would like an easy to click link. All right, that'll do for this week. See you next time.